Hello class, this is Pei Zhang, and this is our sixth presentation for this course. And here we have drafting methodology we'll be covering in this presentation. In order to perform a piece of music properly, musicians rehearse the score, dissecting it, paying attention to particular aspects such as rhythm, phrasing, sound quality, etc., and then integrate everything back into a complex, meaningful whole, which is what we hear in the performance. Likewise, in medical writing, attention is paid to specific aspects of the text production process: readership analysis, organization of content, formal structure, first draft, in-house style norms, revision, and so forth, before everything is integrated into the finished product. In medical translation practice and training, the focus has traditionally been on the result of the process, and more particularly on terminology, rather than on exploring the different operations that take place in the course of writing of the target text. Many of these operations are complex, difficult to describe, and often take place simultaneously. But we need to look at them separately if we are to learn more about them in practical terms. By paying attention to the various parts of the writing process, we can gain insights and improve our performance. Sometimes problems arise and remain to be dealt with, or in the worst cases are left unresolved in the finished text. But many such difficulties could be avoided by following a positive and effective drafting methodology, which can nip problems in the bud. The information and experience offered here should be taken as a starting point, a sound foundation, but not as prescription of what all medical translators should do. We will approach the draft positively, concentrating on the possibilities available to us, rather than analyzing the finished text in negative terms. The draft is the skeleton which we will later flesh out and clothe as appropriate. We should avoid trying to produce a polished text at the first attempt, as if good writing were a linear, irreversible process focused only on microelements. It is not. It would be better to make a series of sketches of growing factual and formal detail, which will eventually result in the finished target text. Drafting and redrafting is a positive and useful aid to improve and refining a text. And if it is done systematically, it can cut down on the time spent on later revisions. In addition, drafting enables us to have a broader and richer view of overall information structure and progression. Finally, this drafting methodology can open professional opportunities, for example, increased expertise in editing original texts. Drafting in 3 steps: composing, crafting, and improving. As far as drafting is concerned, however, translating is a particular type of writing that differs only in some minor details from the above process. So first, you have to be motivated. Secondly, you have to get your ideas together. Third, you have to plan and outline. Then you have to make notes. Then you make your first draft, and then you revise the planning and redraft, and then you edit and get ready for publication. For the translator, you've received your assignment, you understand the source text, you plan and outline, you make a first draft, then you revise the planning and redraft, and lastly, you edit and get ready for publication. As we can see, except for the first 2 activities, the rest are exactly the same between a writing process and a translating process. Aspects relating to the assignment and the comprehension of the source text have been dealt with in other presentations. In this presentation, we examine the rest of the steps just as they could be approached in any other writing process, that is, moving gradually from general aspects of structure and content to more specific details of grammar and style. Improving the draft. Once you have composed the overall structure and crafted the contents of each of the parts of the target text, it is time to sort out any details, both conceptual and formal, that have not yet been addressed. Conceptual and terminological accuracy is one of the key elements in medical translation, since the value of the text often lies in its factual content. Hence, In professional practice, a great deal of the working time at this stage is spent on terminological issues, such as fully understanding the exact sense of particular terms and making adjustments to the target text so that the reader is not misled. Making sure that complex concepts and the relationship between them are fully understandable in the target text. Finding just the right term in the target language, especially in cases of terminological mismatch. Finding sound solutions in cases of neologisms. Exploring synonyms in the target language and deciding which is more suitable for a particular target text. Making sure that terminological solutions are consistent throughout the target text. And detecting and sorting out false synonyms and false friends. These writing tasks often involve considerable time spent researching and consulting reliable information sources, mainly dictionaries, terminological databases, and textbooks about the specific subject matter. They also involve knowledge about terminological variation, especially criteria to sort out neologisms. Ideally, of course, a translation should read like an original text. That is, the readers should not be aware that they are reading a translation. It should feel absolutely right. So what exactly would make us suspect that we're dealing with a translation? Clearly, gross grammatical, lexical, and syntactic errors would render the translation unfit for its purpose, whatever that purpose might be. But there are other, subtler infacilities which might make the reader slightly uncomfortable. Becoming aware of norms is important. In addition to conceptual and terminological accuracy, for a translation to be fully acceptable and accepted, both as a functional text and as a representation of the target culture, it has to conform to the explicit and implicit norms, regularities, conventions, expectations, habits, preferences that regulate written communication in the target situation. The following facts are especially relevant to the medical translator. Different professional communities, nurses, pharmacists, pharmacologists, physiotherapists, psychologists, surgeons, general practitioners, physicians, researchers, tend to have different norms as far as the use of medical language is concerned. For example, the way nurses and physicians explain the same disease to a patient will vary in degree of detail and depth, since they see it from different perspectives and use the information for different purposes. Research journals may have different norms as far as structure and length of texts, terminology, spelling, and style are concerned. For example, one journal may require structured abstracts, whereas another may ask for non-structured abstracts. Publishing houses, pharmaceutical laboratories, and health organizations normally have different in-house style norms. Medical specialties may have different norms as far as terminology is concerned. For example, the same anatomical part may be referred to in different ways in descriptive anatomy, Latin name, and in sports physiotherapy, popular name. Health systems in different countries have different norms as far as information policy and patient status are concerned. For example, in private health systems, the patient is a client and is treated as such. In some countries, the language used in written communication with patients is more explicit than in others owing to possible legal consequences. Different cultures may have different norms in the communication of medical information. For example, in more literate cultures, written medical communication is carried out in highly conventionalized genres, whereas in oral societies, medical communication takes a very different form. Different genres are ruled by different norms as far as register, tenor, terminology, modality, and style are concerned. For example, the patient information leaflet of a specific drug uses a far more personal tenor than the corresponding summary of product characteristics for the same drug. You may be extremely accurate when dealing with the concepts and terms related to a particular drug, but if you're not well aware of the pragmatic and formal differences between a summary of product characteristics and a patient information leaflet for that same drug, you may easily mistranslate your text. When dealing with medical translation assignments, we discover that norms can be both explicit and implicit. Explicit norms are visible, easy to identify and to observe. For example, the in-house style sheets for authors of a specialized journal contains explicit norms that can easily be followed in the writing of the target text. But implicit norms may not be so visible. Variations in the use of tenses, tenor, passive voice, or nominalizations are not made explicit and may be more difficult to detect and to observe. Detecting formal variations and conforming to norms. In the previous section, we have dealt with all kinds of differences in a variety of contexts that may affect decisions in the writing of the target text. Now we will focus on formal variations resulting from the different ways genres are ruled by different norms. We can establish 3 types of variation. The same genre can present variations of structure, register, terminology, tenor, style, modality, and so on in different languages. This is one of the things the medical translator frequently has to deal with. For example, in original articles published in English, hedging, the use of model devices to express caution, is more frequently used than in original articles published in Spanish. 2 texts that deal with exactly the same topic in the same language, but which belong to different genres, may present variations of style, tenor, modality, use of verbal tenses, treatment of terminology, and so on. This is also relevant to medical translators, especially when dealing with genre shifts. Different parts of the same genre in the same language may present all kinds of formal variations. This is particularly important when polishing the final version of the target text. For example, the use of personal pronouns and passive voice often varies between sections in original articles in English. So one of the things that you can do is to study parallel texts. Use bias-free, inclusive language. People suffering from certain diseases may be particularly sensitive to the language used to refer to them and their illnesses. We must be aware of using biased language and unacceptable labels. Even certain euphemisms may fall out of favor and cause offense. Such labels change rapidly, and we need to keep up to date with what is currently acceptable. There may be various reasons why a source text has been written in biased, exclusive language, such as lack of awareness and sensitivity on the part of the author or their social context. However, the fact that the source text uses biased, exclusive language does not mean that we must also use it in the target text. The following recommendations made to medical writers by Matthew in 2000 can also be made to translators. Specify only the differences that are relevant. Differences such as sexual orientation, marital status, age, ethnic identity, or the fact that a person has a disability should be mentioned only when relevant. Be sensitive to group labels. Labels such as the schizophrenic versus the normal in the context of a clinical study may stigmatize individuals with differences. In these cases, we should avoid the label and use a more descriptive solution in the target text, such as people diagnosed with schizophrenia in the above example. Guard against the perception of bias and prejudice. Racism and sexism are 2 of the most frequent types of prejudice. They may or may not be conscious or intentional. Furthermore, the situation varies in different languages, cultures, and countries. Whereas in some, there is more awareness and respect, in others, there is more tolerance to sexism and racism. As translators, we should find alternatives and avoid racist and sexist languages, whether it be unconscious or unintentional or normal in a given language, culture, or country. Avoid awkward coinage. In the effort to avoid racism and sexism in our target text, we may go too far and end up sounding artificial and ridiculous. The middle ground is often preferable so as to avoid undesirable effects. Finishing the final draft. There comes a point when, whether we like it or not, we have to finish the assignment and deliver it to the client. There's always time pressure in professional practice. Deadlines are short and things have to get done. In fact, our professional credibility depends not only on the quality of the target text, but also on meeting deadlines. At this stage, Inexperienced translators in particular may be plagued by doubts and uncertainty about the quality of what they are about to deliver as the finished product. One thought that should comfort us is that we're not asked to do the perfect translation of a particular text. We receive an assignment, and the quality of the target text depends both on the terms of the assignment and the purpose or function of the translation. The quality required in the text that will be published is not the same that needed for a text that will be used internally by a few readers for a limited period of time. Thus, we should establish the difference between what can be improved and what should be improved in a specific assignment. In other words, nearly everything in the translation can be improved. Even if it is perfectly correct and adequate, the best translation can be questioned and improved on the grounds of personal taste. But in professional translation, what really matters are improvements which will eliminate errors or inadequacies and meet the quality requirements of the task. So there are 5 different areas that should be taken into account. Coherence between the source text and the target text. Coherence within the target text. Terminology, grammar and style, formal presentation. The following questions explore these 5 areas of interest and may help to decide what can and what really should be improved in a particular assignment before it is completely finished. Coherence between the source text and the target text. Question: does the translation reflect the intended meaning of the source text? Have any of the factual elements of the message been left out without justification? Coherence within the target text. Does the sequence of ideas make sense? Is there any nonsense or contradiction? Are there any factual, conceptual, or mathematical errors? Terminology. Is terminology unified throughout the text? Are there misleading synonyms? Does it reflect the preferences of the client and the target genre? Grammar and style. Does the text flow? Are the connections between sentences clear? Are the relationships among the parts of each sentence clear? Are there any awkward, hard-to-read sentences? Is the style suited to the genre? Does the phraseology match that used in the original target language texts on the same subject? Are all the word combinations idiomatic? Does the translator observe the rhetorical preferences of the target language? Have the rules of grammar, spelling, punctuation, house style, and correct usage been observed? Formal presentation. Are there any problems in the way the text is arranged on the page? Spacing, indentation, margins? Are there any problems of text formatting? Bolding, underlining, font type, font size? Are there any problems in the way the document as a whole is organized? Page numbering, headers, footnotes, table of content?